The internet is in shock. Suga of BTS was thought to be back in Korea solely for a close friend's wedding, but new footage reveals he actually flew back and forth from the US just to meet someone completely off the radar. His entire demeanor changed in one unexpected moment, and yes, it was all caught in real time amid a crowd that barely noticed the superstar was even there. Everyone assumed Suga's presence in Korea was only to attend a fellow musician's wedding, but the truth behind his fast steps and intense expression as he stepped out of a sleek black car this afternoon reveals something far deeper, because unlike his usual heavily guarded appearances, Suga moved with quiet urgency, wearing only a white mask and a plain black cap, his eyes clearly holding something unspoken, and right as he reached the side of the event venue, a moment that completely escaped mainstream cameras began circulating from one phone to another, showing him speaking in a hushed yet firm voice to someone whose face was deliberately blurred by the uploader. But the audio was crystal clear and caught him saying, "You don't have to come. I didn't come here just for that. You're more important." And just like that, the internet exploded with speculation, because the interaction wasn't just casual. It was emotional, raw, and Suga was even seen turning his face toward the wall to take a deep breath before nodding silently and walking into the building. And what made it even more shocking was the statement from a local staff member, briefly interviewed by a fan outside the venue gates, who said Suga had just come directly from the airport and would be flying back to the US later that same night. And when asked why he wouldn't be staying, the source simply said, "He said he only needed a few hours here, it's personal," which immediately triggered a flood of TikTok and X clips analyzing every second of Suga's movements, including the moment he was handed a small gray object, looking like a slim wallet, from someone behind a curtain, which he instantly tucked into his jacket pocket before vanishing from public view. And later that night, multiple fans waiting at the international departures area uploaded stories saying they saw him again, wearing the exact same clothes, sitting alone with earphones in and staring blankly at the flight board. But what's even more mind-blowing isn't just his sudden trip to Korea. It's the confirmation that this wasn't the first time he's pulled off a secret round trip like this, because an airport staff member confirmed that the alias Suga used for his booking had already appeared in their system 2 days prior, meaning this visit was carefully planned, not spontaneous, as many had assumed. And when a former BTS production crew member casually dropped a DM to a fan site saying, "Sometimes Suga does this when it's about that one person," the attention of global fans shifted to the possibility that someone incredibly significant was behind this, someone important enough for Suga to cross continents in a single night. And although the identity hasn't been revealed, fans are convinced the voice heard in the video, despite the blurred face, is familiar, and some believe it matches audio from a behind-the-scenes clip posted last year, which has now mysteriously been deleted from the agency's official channel, leading to a flood of amateur voice analyses, timeline comparisons, and even footstep pattern decoding based on the faint audio captured in the background of that viral clip. But what shook everyone even more was the final moment before boarding, when one fan claimed they saw Suga quietly looking at a small photo in his hand before closing his eyes, as if trying to memorize a moment too precious to lose. And that's when the earlier words of the airport staff hit harder than anyone expected. He looked like someone who knew exactly why he had to come home today, not for the event, but for the person. The deeper fans dig, the stranger the timeline becomes, because as the day unfolds and more airport staff from both Incheon and LAX quietly begin acknowledging Suga's unusual travel patterns, a pattern of secrecy and personal urgency begins to emerge, revealing that this recent trip is not an isolated incident but the 4th round trip he's made within a tight stretch of time, and all without public schedule updates, agency announcements, or media coverage, which immediately sends the fandom into detective mode, comparing international flight records, spotting his airport outfits, and dissecting all non-scheduled gaps in BTS content where he may have slipped away unnoticed. And one particular finding turns everything upside down. A now-deleted Reddit thread resurfaced through screenshots, showing a flight attendant's account from a Tokyo layover weeks earlier who recognized Suga on board a connecting flight from Seoul to LAX, describing him as extremely quiet, alone, and wearing the same bracelet seen in his most recent Korean footage. And what makes this detail gripping is that the bracelet isn't part of any styling. It's handmade, reportedly gifted by someone close, as seen in a live stream months ago where Suga briefly mentioned, "It was from a person I trust," before quickly changing the subject And now fans are replaying that moment with new context, reinterpreting every glance, every pause, every shift in tone, because clearly this isn't just a visit. It's a series of returns, all centered around one unnamed individual whose identity remains off the radar, but whose impact on Suga is now unmistakable. And what turns this from a private matter into a full-blown headline is what happens next at a Seoul cafe known to be a discreet meeting spot for public figures. Because shortly after leaving the wedding venue, Suga was spotted entering the cafe's private room and tranced through the back alley, where only a handful of fans, tipped off by a local employee, managed to record distant audio, and the only thing audible was a laugh, low and genuine. That fans haven't heard from him in a long time, and according to a staff member who chose not to show their face, Suga stayed in the room for under an hour, and during that time, no other customers were allowed near the second floor. And although no photos of the guest he met have emerged, one barista claimed the person was already inside before Suga arrived, having entered with a staff escort directly from a waiting vehicle, and when Suga exited alone, he was seen carrying a tote bag slung casually over one shoulder, holding what looked like a gift box wrapped in navy paper with golden trim, which fans are now linking to a limited artisan book collection once shown on his studio shelf, known to be out of print and incredibly rare. And one fan account noted that during an old Weverse Live, Suga once said he always saves his most valuable gifts for someone who'd never expect it. And now the theories explode, not because of one meeting or one quote, but because every clue lines up, every breadcrumb leads to the same path, and even though the cafe denied any knowledge of a private celebrity meeting that day, the pattern is too specific to ignore. And what fuels the fire even more is the discovery of multiple studio downtime slots in the LA-based calendar of Suga's producers, suggesting that he deliberately scheduled gaps, not for rest, but for travel, and fans are now convinced this isn't a random series of events but a deliberate balancing act between personal and professional life, and what they can't get over is that the person who seems to be at the center of it all hasn't been identified. Not even once. No photos, no leaks, no names, just a blurry video, a voice, a gift, a laugh, and a series of flights that never made it to the headlines. As the story tightens, everything begins pointing toward one undeniable truth. Suga isn't just fitting personal time into a chaotic schedule, he's orchestrating an entirely separate rhythm to his life. One that runs parallel to the high-speed machinery of global fame yet remains virtually invisible. And the depth of this hidden side begins to show through subtle cracks, especially when a staff member from his American team anonymously admitted in a fan forum thread that yoongi has been asking for last-minute flight adjustments more frequently than usual, followed by a note that these changes were often outside any group-related activities, with no accompanying staff or PR team, and if that wasn't enough, new visual evidence surfaces from a discreet airport CCTV leak, quickly removed, but not before being screenshotted, showing Suga walking through an arrival gate with a single small carry-on and a coat draped over his arm, clearly avoiding any high-profile passageway. While, simultaneously in Seoul, a private driver service received a same-day booking under a name matching one of Suga's known aliases used during solo projects, and this driver, unaware of the identity at first, later posted anonymously that he picked up a quiet man from the airport and dropped him at an apartment complex with underground access. No security detail, no media. And the implication hits hard, because if true, it means that not only is Suga flying back and forth in silence, but he's also bypassing hotels and known locations entirely, choosing instead to go somewhere intimately private, and fans begin analyzing old interviews, particularly one where Suga once said, "Peace for me is being able to just exist without being watched," which now takes on a whole new meaning, especially after one of the cafe workers who saw him days earlier posted a now-deleted comment that he didn't look like an idol, he looked like a man trying to protect a bubble he never gets. And that one sentence ignites a wildfire of discussions about what kind of connection could make someone like Suga so committed to secrecy, because even fellow BTS members have always respected his space, rarely teasing him about relationships, and one clip from a behind-the-scenes video shows Taeyong joking, "He disappears like a ghost sometimes," to which Suga only smiles without explaining, and now that smile feels heavier, more deliberate, as fans revisit every instance he slipped away from frame or ended alive early, wondering if those were windows into these unspoken escapes. And it's not just the mystery that fascinates people, but the emotion behind it, because everything, From the late-night flights to the silent meetings to the same unchanging look in his eyes. Speaks of someone protecting something precious, something he refuses to let the world chew up the way it devours headlines. And when another barista from a separate sighting revealed that Suga spent over 15 minutes flipping through pages of a poetry book during his stay, not touching his phone once, it struck fans that perhaps this wasn't just about a person, but about a life he's trying to hold on to before it disappears completely under the weight of expectation. And as this realization sinks in, the internet begins buzzing again, not with gossip, but with a strange kind of reverence, because Suga isn't running from fame, he's stealing moments from it, and the fact that he's doing it so flawlessly only raises one final question that no one dares say out loud, but everyone feels tightening in their chest. What would happen if one day he simply chose not to come back, and now everything begins to converge into a picture too precise to dismiss, because while the rest of the world moves on, chasing headlines about group activities and comeback rumors, those following Suga's silent movements start noticing the emotional weight behind his recent expressions, the quiet stillness in his eyes during a brief airport clip, the gentle way he handled the blue-wrapped box at the cafe, the lingering gaze toward the arrival exit before stepping back into the car. And all of it leads to a quiet confession posted by someone claiming to be a longtime acquaintance, not famous, not connected to any fandom, who simply wrote, "He never says much, but you know when he cares. He'll cross oceans if he has to." And that single post, though quickly drowned in thousands of retweets, hit differently because it wasn't dramatic, wasn't cryptic, it was real, and for fans who've been dissecting timelines and audio clips for days, it felt like the final missing puzzle piece, the one that explains why Suga would fly over 10 hours just to stay for less than 2, why he'd avoid every media outlet, every possible leak, just to sit in a room with someone away from all cameras. And now the question isn't who the person is, but how deep their bond must be. Because people don't fly across time zones multiple times for comfort. They do it for necessity. And in one resurfaced clip from a previous documentary, Suga once quietly said, "I don't need to be understood, I just need to be allowed." And that quote now returns with heavier resonance as fans realize that every step he's taken recently seems to be rooted in reclaiming that right, to live parts of his life without explanation, to give pieces of himself to someone who exists beyond the scope of fandom or fame. And that's when the atmosphere shifts, because what began as a speculative series of secret visits now feels like the outline of a parallel life. A second rhythm composed by Suga himself, structured with silence and softness, built around unscheduled moments and unwritten rules, and as another unnamed source from his production circle quietly shares that yoongi's happiest when he's making music at night and knowing someone's waiting for him to call. It becomes clear that all of this, the cafe visits, the flights, the masked entrances, are not random. They're rituals, carefully chosen acts of protection for a bond that remains off-grid not because it's scandalous, but because it's sacred. And just when fans think the mystery has reached its emotional peak, an unexpected moment from a live broadcast resurfaces, where Suga, reading fan comments, suddenly pauses and says, "Sometimes the most important things are what we never share," before offering a rare, lingering smile and ending the stream. And now that sentence sits at the center of every theory, every post, every rewatch, because that smile wasn't scripted, it wasn't fan service. It was the smile of someone who's found something worth shielding from the noise, and as the footage from his return flight fades into a blur of airport glass and moving shadows, what lingers isn't the mystery or the identity of the person he visited, but the profound silence Suga has managed to carve out in a world that never stops asking, never stops watching, never stops taking. And in that silence, he isn't Min Yoongi the idol. He's just a man on a journey. Again, perhaps already boarding another flight, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a photograph folded small enough to fit where no one else can see it.